I never thought zipping up my granddaughter's coat would end in a whisper that shattered everything I thought I knew. "Grandma," she said, her little fingers tugging at the edge of my sleeve. "Mommy said not to touch the red bag under her bed, 'cause that's where she keeps the white powder she sells." It didn't register at first. The words just hung there. I was bent down, my hand still frozen around the zipper, while the last echo of her voice curled into the silence between us like a fog. Outside, the taillights of Chantel's Lexus glowed red as she sped off down Maple Hollow Drive, tires slicing through the wet October street like she couldn't get away fast enough. She'd only said 8 words before leaving. "I need a break, just a day or 2, and not one more." Left her own 5-year-old child on my porch, without a bag, no toothbrush, not even a sweater. I stood up slow, heart knocking against my ribs. "What kind of powder, baby?" I asked, steady as I could manage. She shrugged. "White. Like sugar. But Mommy said don't touch it, or the man will be mad." That was when the ice formed in my stomach. Not fear, yet, but that hollow humming cold that tells you something is very, very wrong. I didn't touch my phone right away. I walked her to the couch, handed her the quilt my mother made in, 72, and turned on Peppa Pig. She hummed along, already half asleep, like her little heart hadn't just revealed something monstrous. It was 8:43 p.m. The lamp in the hallway buzzed like it always did. The front door still let in the scent of rain-soaked pine. My own reflection, startled and too pale, stared back at me from the hallway mirror. Then I picked up the phone. I called 911. "Jackson Dispatch. What's your emergency? My name is Renetta Clark. I'm at 3814 Maple Hollow Drive in South Jackson. My daughter-in-law dropped off my granddaughter and left without warning. The child just said something that needs to be documented immediately. She said her mother keeps a red bag under the bed that has white powder in it. She said her mother sells it." I repeated every word exactly, as flat and clear as I could, because there's a moment when your blood knows something before your mind is ready. That was this moment, and I knew the rest of my life would split into 2 parts, before she said it and after. The moment the cruiser headlights lit up my front steps, I felt a steel rod rise up through my spine. My voice had wavered when I called, but not now. Not as I opened the door and let Officer Perry step into the home I'd built with quiet care over 40 years. "I'm the one who called," I said, already holding out my ID. My hands didn't shake. They felt like wood, polished, still, prepared. I pointed to the little girl sleeping under the quilt, one pink sock off, her breath soft and even. He followed my eyes and nodded, more human than I expected. Late 30s, maybe, with a calm about him that didn't feel performative. "Take your time, Miss Clark," he said. I didn't need it. I sat upright on the floral love seat that had outlived 3 mayors and both my marriages, and told him everything again. The coat, the whisper, the red bag, the white powder. Her exact words, unedited. He wrote them down on a lined notepad, while his body cam blinked faint red at his chest. Chantel's number went to voicemail 3 times. No message. The officer tried too, with the same result. Her name in my phone still had a little heart beside it. That detail stayed between me and God. She said her mother told her not to touch the bag because of the man. Said it was where she keeps the white powder she sells. "Do you know what kind of powder she meant?" Perry asked gently. "I know what it isn't," I replied. "And I know where my limits are. That child deserves to be safe." He nodded again and made a few more notes. The house was silent except for the soft hum of the fridge and the wind brushing past the windows. He asked if the child had been left before. I answered honestly, "Yes, not like this." When he asked who owned the home, I walked him to the roll-top desk in the corner. The 1997 deed, still in my name, untouched. I handed it to him with the gravity of a ledger. He skimmed it, then set it down with a quiet respect. "Thank you for your time, Miss Clark. I'll be following up personally." Officer Perry left me with a card and a weight I wasn't sure I wanted lifted. But I had started something, and I didn't intend to stop. Just yesterday, October 13th, the world was still intact, or at least held together by the small rituals I'd spent decades perfecting. In my kitchen, where the scent of vinegar and pepper always lingered near the baseboards, I'd cooked a skillet of fried cabbage and rice, while the pot of sweet tea chilled in the fridge. The vinyl floors had been scrubbed that morning until they shone like waxed leaves, and the sun had filtered in through my lace curtains just right, making the counters look warmer than they were. My granddaughter sat at the table with her legs swinging under the chair, humming something tuneless. We bowed our heads and said grace, my voice leading and her little echo trailing behind. "Bless the hands that prepared it, Lord," she said proudly, her eyes still closed. She asked for seconds, licked her fork, slept a full 10 hours that night without a fuss. I remember thinking, as I pulled the Afghan up to her chin, how peaceful her face looked when she knew she was safe. That's what this house has always been. Not perfect, but consistent, built on order and good habits and a gentle kind of pride. I've lived here since 1997, paid off the mortgage early, never missed a tax bill, never once let the garden fall into disrepair. My pension from the school district comes in on the 28th like clockwork, $2,300 a month. I budget it down to the dime. My bills, my groceries, my tithes to Bethel AME, all covered. I taught third grade for 27 years before I retired, ran the Black History Bulletin Board every February, volunteered for summer reading. The kind of life that doesn't make headlines, but builds a neighborhood. Chantel used to tease me about my routine. "You've got your whole little grandma set up," she'd say with a smirk, snapping pictures of her daughter eating cornbread on the porch for Instagram. I let her laugh. Let her think this quiet life was small. Let her believe the vinyl floors and floral curtains and yard flags made me soft. Because the truth is, I didn't think she'd ever cross a line I couldn't overlook. But that was yesterday. And now, that quiet life is evidence, worth protecting. I gave Chantel her key in March of 2021, standing right in my living room, just beneath the wedding photo we'd taken in front of Bethel's ivy-covered arch. Malik had called from his post in the Pacific a week before, his voice thick with pride and distance. "She's good people, Mama. I trust her to keep things steady." Steady. That was the word he used, and I'd repeated it to myself as I slid the bronze key from the ring and pressed it into her hand. She had smiled wide, that high-gloss grin she was so good at, brought over a chilled bottle of Moscato, and plopped down on my couch like she'd known me 20 years. "Thanks, Mom," she said that day, the word unfamiliar but oddly warm on her lips. We toasted with mismatched glasses, and she asked about Malik's baby pictures. Said she wanted to make a memory wall in their hallway. I pulled out the box from the hall closet without a second thought, showed her his Cub Scout vest, the report cards, the birthday cards from relatives long past. Her eyes were damp at the corners when she held the one from his kindergarten graduation. "He always talks about how you raised him right," she murmured, and I believed her. The holidays that year were soft around the edges. Chantel made her first sweet potato pie for Christmas dinner, and I let her niece and nephew run around my living room with juice-stained fingers. We took photos by the tree, me in my red knit dress, her in sequins, Malik smiling from a tablet screen perched on the mantel. She sent heart emojis after. "You're the best mother-in-law," she texted that night. "I'm so lucky. I helped cover $5,000 for the wedding without hesitation, paid the caterer directly, drove her to fittings, let her use my mailing address when her work situation shifted, gave her presents the benefit of the doubt because my son was at sea and I needed to believe he hadn't left his child in the wrong hands. Back then, the house key felt like a gesture of love. Now it feels like a mistake carved into brass. The morning after the officer left, I sat at my dining table with the curtains drawn and the room dim except for the amber spill of the lamp by the hutch. My phone lay screen up beside me, its gallery a patchwork of smiling faces and Zelle confirmations. I opened the Chase app, thumbed past the auto pays and grocery runs, and pulled up the transfers. Then I started writing. 150 here, labeled emergency. 200 there, daycare shortfall. 40 every few days for weeks, sometimes twice a day, with messages like, folded hands just till Friday, or, ugh, help, please. It added up. It always added up. Over 2 years, the tally reached $13,280 before I even hit September of this year. I wrote each one down on a yellow legal pad in tidy rows, drawing lines under every $500 with a cold, accountant's precision, a teacher's instinct for record keeping, still intact. I remembered each excuse clearly, how the text tone would ding while I was checking coupons or watching the evening news. Can you float $200 till Friday? Or Malik's birthday coming. Gotta make it nice. There was a kind of urgency in her requests, but never shame. That was the part one can't seem to forget. How naturally it came to her, like it was her right to reach for my pocketbook whenever her plans went sideways. Chantel always had a tone, like she was performing gratitude on a stage. Too big, too bright. "You saved us again, Mama R," she'd say, after I'd transferred rent money, always with that same sparkle emoji, and a promise to pay it back when the tax return hits. But the tax return never did. Or if it did, it skipped over me entirely. When Deacon Walker pulled me aside after Bible study last spring and said, "Don't let her drain you dry, Renetta," I nodded and smiled, but I didn't listen. Not really. I thought being generous was the same as being godly. I thought saying yes made me dependable. But staring down that legal pad, watching the lines stretch across 2 pages, I realized I had been more than generous. I had been harvested. And the worst part? I thought I was being loved. The memory of that day at the BP station crept in like a shadow under the door. Quiet, but impossible to ignore once it settled. It was June 2nd, mid-afternoon, already scorching. I had stopped to fill up before heading to pick up my granddaughter from summer camp. As I pulled around to the pump, I spotted Chantel's silver Lexus idling in the shade near the air machines. At first, I didn't think much of it. We crossed paths often enough around Jackson, but then I saw the man lean into her window. A slim figure in baggy jeans and a black hoodie, too hot for the weather, face mostly obscured. His movements were quick, practiced. She handed him something small, folded. He gave her a wad of cash. It wasn't long enough to be a conversation, just a transaction, clean and sharp. He walked off without a word. I eased my car into the next row, pretending not to watch. She hadn't seen me, or if she had, she didn't care. Later that night, when I asked her offhand what she'd been doing at the BP, she barely looked up from her phone. "Oh, that? Just an old friend. Owed me money from back in the day." Her smile was easy, light, practiced. "I told him to meet me close to your side of town so I wouldn't have to drive far." I let it go. I wanted to believe her. I told myself there was no reason to pry, that not every mystery deserved unraveling. I even wrote it down in my journal that night, not as an accusation, just a flicker of unease. Chantel at BP, strange exchange with man. Trust but verify. I'd scrawled in the corner margin, next to my grocery list and scripture notes. It's strange how we learn to file away the things that don't sit right. Not confront them, just slide them into a drawer of doubt we rarely open. I suppose that's what made her so dangerous. Not just what she did, but how easily she lulled me into silence. Miss Gloria, my neighbor, said it best a week later while we were trimming roses over the fence line. "That girl's slicker than she look," she muttered. I laughed then, like it was a joke. Now I know it was a warning. By the evening of October 16th, I'd stopped trying to guess when Chantel might resurface. The first night, I told myself she'd had a crisis. Car trouble, bad reception, something halfway reasonable. But by the second, with the sun setting again on a porch that had become both waiting room and witness, I understood that she had no intention of returning on any schedule that included respect. The child asked twice, "Is Mommy coming tonight?" I told her honestly, "I don't know, baby, but you're safe here." She didn't cry, not even when she curled up on the couch again instead of her little bed at home. She just held onto that old beaded bear Malik had carried through 3 deployments, her thumb in her mouth like she was trying to hush her own doubt. I paced the porch like a sentry, one eye on the street, the other on the phone that kept lighting up with silence. My calls to Chantel were ignored. My texts read, but not answered. Then, sometime around 8:20, a message finally came through. Don't start. I'll be back when I'm back. No greeting, no apology. No acknowledgement that her daughter had eaten all her meals at my table and bathed in my tub for 2 nights like she belonged more here than anywhere else. That was the moment the shape of things changed. I sat back down, my breath tight, and scrolled through old messages. All the sweetness and emoji-laced affection that used to follow a favor. Gone. Replaced with short commands and thin excuses. I noticed the pattern now, not just of absence, but of erosion. My trust, my resources, my place in my son's family, all slowly chipped away until I barely recognized my role. And then I remembered something else. Malik's child support. It had stopped showing up in my account 3 months back. When I'd asked, Chantel blamed a paperwork error, said the Navy had messed up the routing. But now I started to wonder who had truly rerouted what. I picked up the phone again, but this time I didn't call her. I called Child Protective Services, not to claim custody, not to make a scene, just to ask for an emergency consult, because this wasn't about me anymore. It was about a little girl with a bear and no bedtime story from her mother for 2 nights running. At 7:35 a.m. On October 17th, the sound of police tires crunching across my driveway jolted me from the chair where I had nodded off fully dressed. My hands were still clutched around a mug of tea gone cold. I opened the door before they knocked. 2 officers stood there. One I recognized instantly. Officer Perry. His face was stern, but not unkind. Beside him, a younger woman in uniform, clipboard in hand, eyes sharp with purpose. The little girl was still asleep, sprawled across the love seat with her hair mussed and one sock half off. I stepped outside, closing the door behind me to preserve that last little bit of her peace. The school counselor reported a statement from your granddaughter, Perry said quietly. Matches what she told you. I nodded, heart steady, stomach rolling. She mentioned the red duffel bag again. Same location, same contents. The warrant had already been signed. They didn't need my permission, but they waited anyway. I led them in without ceremony, pointed toward the back room Chantel used when she stayed over. Rarely, but still often enough to clutter the closet with designer bags and lashes, in little cases. The red duffel sat under the bed exactly where the child said it would be. I watched from the hall as the young officer unzipped it and stepped back, gloved hands steady. Inside were 3 small baggies, each marked in black Sharpie with the words, baby powder. Perry glanced at me over his shoulder. She said this was what her mother sells? Yes, I answered. She was clear. He didn't need to say more. He bagged them for evidence, logged the location, and took photos with a department-issued phone. I didn't flinch when he asked me to sign the inventory sheet. My name was already part of the record. That was when the storm arrived. Chantel's Lexus screeched to a stop at the curb, barely parked before she flew up the walkway barefoot, hair wild, rage already spilling from her. You're poisoning my daughter against me. You think you're some kind of saint? She's my child. I stood in the driveway as neighbors peeked from windows. I didn't raise my voice, but I didn't retreat either. Because, for once, I wasn't the one on trial. By October 20th, the wind had turned sharp and the mail sharpest of all. I found the envelope tucked into my box just after noon, nestled between a sale flyer and the church newsletter. Legal-sized, cream-colored, with my name spelled in the stiff precision of courthouse font. Inside, a petition for emergency custody, filed by Chantel Renee Griggs. The accusations were brazen: manipulation, instability, emotional interference. That I was withholding the minor child from her lawful guardian without consent. That I was creating confusion in the child's emotional development due to age-related cognitive decline. It read like a script crafted by someone hoping I'd panic, not prepare. But panic never came. Only the slow boil of a humiliation too public to ignore. Neighbors who once waved from porches began crossing the street. At Bethel AME, I felt the hush before it reached my pew. Whispers dressed in concern. Maybe she's just tired. She's been through a lot. The kind of talk that cloaks itself in pity, but carries a scalpel's edge. Chantel had been busy. She told the church ladies I was slipping, that I'd gotten confused and thought Malik was still here, though he'd been overseas since May. I could almost hear her voice mimicking a sorrow she didn't feel, her eyes wide and wet for effect. Even my cousin Yvette didn't return my call. For the first time in decades, I felt alone in my own skin, not invisible, but scrutinized. Each trip to the grocery store came with side glances and 2 careful greetings. People treated me like glass, like whatever was left of my dignity might shatter if the truth got too close. But the truth wasn't fragile. It was gathering. I sat on the courthouse steps alone that Monday, the petition trembling in my hands, not from fear, but fury. Not for the lie itself, but for how easily she'd turned a neighborhood into a jury and me into a cautionary tale. She wanted the court to force me to hand over the child, to grant her access to retrieve the minor's belongings from my home. No mention of where she'd been those 2 nights. No record of the bag under the bed. Only paper. But I've learned something about paper. It cuts both ways. That Monday night, I sat on the edge of my bed, the house silent but not calm. The child was asleep in the next room, her breath steady as a metronome, while I stared at the edge of the carpet where it met the hardwood, trying to still my own. I hadn't cried. I hadn't shouted, but something inside me had settled in a way that felt permanent. I picked up my phone, not to scroll, not to check for more damage, but to act. The first call I made was to attorney Crystal Howell. We'd met years ago at a community education event where she spoke on elder fraud. She'd passed me her card, just in case. I hadn't thought much of it then, but at 12:03 a.m., I left a voicemail that didn't wobble. Ms. Howell, this is Renetta Clark. I'm in need of counsel regarding a custody petition filed under false claims, and I have documented evidence. I believe my daughter-in-law poses a risk to her child. I can pay a consultation fee, she called back within 10 minutes. You don't owe me a thing, Ms. Clark. I'll take the case. We'll start with containment. Containment meant boundaries. And the first was physical. I paid $145 that morning to have all the locks changed. Front, back, and both side doors. I replaced the worn brass knobs with brushed steel and had the locksmith install a keypad entry on the front porch. No more shared keys, no more unannounced entries. When he handed me the new codes, I pressed my thumb against the smooth buttons, like they were a lifeline. The second step was digital. I took screenshots of Chantel's latest social media posts. The one that stung most had gone up the night before. A blurry picture of her standing outside my house captioned, "My daughter got kidnapped by a bitter grandma who can't accept her time is up." The comments section was full of fire emojis, heart reacts, and one from her cousin saying, "Call the cops, girl. That's elder abuse in reverse." I archived it all. Reported what I could. Saved the rest for Crystal. Because midnight had brought me clarity and no small measure of resolve. I wasn't fighting for attention, or approval, or even custody. I was fighting for truth, to leave a mark deeper than her lies ever could. On the morning of October 22nd, I walked into the Regions Bank branch near the old Metro Center Mall, like I was walking into court. Not in fear, but with the solemn purpose of someone ready to close a chapter that had cost her more than money. I wore my pressed navy blouse, the one I used to wear to parent-teacher nights, and carried a folder marked Financial Cleanup. Mr. Neville, the branch manager, recognized me immediately. He'd helped me set up Malik's custodial account back when he was still in middle school. He smiled politely and motioned me to his glass-walled office, his tone gentle, the way people speak to someone freshly grieving. Maybe I was grieving, in a way, not a death but the slow theft of trust. "I need to remove someone," I said plainly, sitting across from him. He nodded, already clicking through my profile. "Authorized user?" "Yes, Chantel Griggs." The records populated fast. There it was, her name, attached to my backup debit card, listed as a verified user on an auto-debit utility setup I didn't remember authorizing. My hands didn't shake, but the weight of it hit like humidity, clinging, suffocating. I'd also like to close the joint expense account and revoke all third-party access. He paused, searching my eyes, maybe trying to see if I understood the permanence of what I'd just requested. I did. Of course, he said softly. We'll take care of everything now. He slid papers across the desk. Deauthorization forms, a cancellation of linked card access, an account closure statement. I initialed every line, signed in full, dated them October 22nd, 11:15 a.m. As he printed the final confirmations, my phone buzzed on the desk. Cash App notification. A new request. $600 UR responsibility. No name. Just bold letters and a demand. As if the account was still open. As if my wallet still belonged to her by birthright of marriage. I tilted the screen toward Mr. Neville. That, I said, is what I'm finished with. He nodded, slid the paperwork into a folder, and shook my hand. You're doing the right thing, Miss Clark. I stepped out into the October air with a folder full of boundaries. The tap was off, and I wasn't about to let her find another pipe to siphon from. October 23rd found me in the back room that once served as my sewing corner, now repurposed into a war room of sorts. The dusty printer I'd nearly donated in the spring hummed back to life, spitting out pages one by one. Zelle screenshots, dated transfers, call logs from 911, the CPS intake form. Each sheet fed into a manila folder I labeled in blue ink. Chantel custody evidence. No drama. Just facts, lined up in rows. The house was quiet except for the slow churn of the print queue and the occasional creak of the floorboards, settling under the weight of change. I moved with precision, not panic. Years of grading papers had taught me how to organize chaos into clarity. I made subfolders, financial, police, text messages, school counselor notes. I even printed the Facebook post accusing me of kidnapping, screenshot at 10:42 p.m., her tone syrupy and sinister. Y'all pray for me. My baby's being kept by someone who ain't well. Each post, each slander, each lie was now ink on paper, something you could slide across a table in a quiet room and watch the truth burn through silence. Crystal, my attorney, had insisted on paper copies. Screenshots are good, but judges like staples, she'd said with a dry laugh. So I stapled. I triple-checked timestamps. I reprinted anything blurry. I wasn't giving this woman a single inch of wiggle room. Not one loophole for her to slide through on charm or chaos. Around noon, I made 2 identical USB drives, labeled both with nail polish, one blue, one silver, and slid them into padded envelopes. One went into the safe behind my bookshelf, the other into my purse. I paused for a moment at the window, watching the wind sweep across the lawn. The little girl was napping again, this time with her head on the Bible I'd left on the couch. A quiet, accidental kind of reverence. Outside, the world moved like it always had. Cars passing, leaves tumbling. But inside this house, a record had been made. Not of vengeance, not of anger, but of proof. Undeniable, orderly, and sharp. I wasn't preparing for a fight. I was preparing to be believed. The fellowship hall smelled faintly of coffee and lemon pledge, the kind of scent that clings to old wooden chairs and memories. Tuesday evening prayer circle had always been my quiet sanctuary, a place where the worn voices of women who'd seen too much still sang out with certainty. But tonight I wasn't there to pray, I was there to speak. I waited until the last amen faded, then stood with my folder under one arm and my spine as straight as it would go. I need 5 minutes, I said, eyes turned, not unkind, just surprised. I had always been the quiet one, the casserole bringer, the gentle nod in the second pew. Pastor Timmons gave me a small nod. The floor is yours, Sister Renetta. I took it with both feet planted firm. I told them, carefully, calmly, what had been happening. The child dropped off, the red duffel bag, the school report, the custody filing, the lies. I didn't embellish, I didn't need to. The truth carried its own weight. Gasps broke the silence when I mentioned the police search. Hands flew to mouths when I explained the online accusations, but no one interrupted. They just listened. When I reached the end, I opened the folder, pulled out the silver USB, and handed it to Pastor Timmons. This has the police statements, the screenshots, and the CPS report. I don't want church gossip. I want church covering. He took it with both hands, like it was fragile. We'll do right by this, he said. And I believed him. Afterwards, as the chairs scraped and murmurs rose, Sister Francine made her way through the crowd and wrapped me in a hug that nearly took the air from my lungs. I saw how that girl talked to you back in June, she whispered. Didn't sit right with me then, don't sit right now. You need someone to testify. I will. I hadn't known I needed that until she said it. There are circles that close around you like traps, and there are circles that close around you like arms. This night, was the second kind. By the afternoon of October 25th, the sun hung low and mean, casting long shadows across the legal aid office downtown. I sat in the small waiting area, knees tight together, folder in lap, heart steady. Crystal emerged from the back in her usual brisk stride, a stack of papers in hand, her lipstick a muted war paint red. Come on, she said. We're filing the cease and desist today. Inside her narrow office, she laid the packet on the desk between us. The language was firm, exact. You are hereby ordered to cease all contact, digital or physical, with Renetta Clark. You are not authorized to enter her property. Further harassment will be documented and pursued through legal channels. I read it twice before signing. Not because I doubted it, but because I wanted to feel the weight of each word. These weren't threats. These were boundaries made visible. This wasn't revenge, it was relief. Crystal clicked through the email client on her computer and sent the letter directly to Chantel's last known address and her listed legal email. Delivery receipt will confirm it was received, she said, nodding toward the screen. We file a copy with the court and one with CPS. No wiggle room. I sat back, breathing in the sterile office air, laced faintly with toner and old carpet. For the first time in weeks, my breath didn't hitch. She's going to call this elder abuse, I murmured. She can try, Crystal replied, her tone dry as paper. But she'll be shouting it into a wall of affidavits, timestamps, and bagged evidence. Outside, the city kept moving. Trucks, sirens, lives I wasn't part of. But here, in this quiet office, I had drawn a line she couldn't smudge with charm or chaos. Before I left, Crystal handed me a fresh copy of the letter, stapled at the corner. I tucked it into the folder that had grown thicker by the day. It didn't feel like a shield anymore. It felt like a map. She's going to come harder now, I said. She'll try, Crystal agreed. But this time, she'll hit a wall. Not a wall of silence, or prayer, or passive hope. A wall built of paper. And I was ready to hold the line. Family night at Bethel AME was usually a balm. Hot cider, foil pans of casserole, children weaving between tables, while the organist played hymns with just enough swing to make them sound new. But that night, October 26th, the warmth of the room was pierced the moment Chantel walked in. She came dressed like she was headed to court, not church. Sharp blazer, heels clicking like punctuation marks on the basement floor. A man followed closely behind, briefcase in hand, eyes already scanning for someone to intimidate. Her attorney, no doubt. She moved straight toward Pastor Timmons, waving a sheet of paper like a flag before a battle. I have a right to be heard, she announced, loud enough to still the music and tilt every face in her direction. This woman has made false accusations that could ruin my life. I'm here to set the record straight. The room hushed. Forks paused midair. My granddaughter sat frozen beside me, eyes wide, unsure what any of it meant. Pastor Timmons raised one hand, calm but commanding. Ms. Griggs, you are in the Lord's house. We do not do trials in this hall. But if you have brought something, we will witness it in full. She shoved the paper at him, a typed letter, undated, full of vague claims about misunderstandings, overreactions, and malicious intent. Her voice rose in pitch with each word, her outrage ballooning, taking up space like smoke. I'm her daughter-in-law. She's making this all up because she wants to keep my child and my money. She's unstable, she's manipulative, she's lonely. I felt eyes swing toward me, some questioning, some already weary. Then the doors opened again, and Crystal Howell walked in, calm, unbothered, her binder in hand like scripture. She moved to my side without a word and whispered, "Let's end this now." Pastor looked at me. "Do you wish to respond, Sister Renetta?" I rose, heart thudding, but voice steady. "Yes," I said, with proof. The projector was already warming behind us. The screen lit blue. Crystal placed her binder on the table like a gavel. "We'll let the evidence speak." And suddenly, family night had a new agenda. At exactly 6:45 p.m., under the flickering fluorescence of Bethel's fellowship hall, I gave Crystal a single nod. She stepped forward, smooth and unbothered, as if she'd rehearsed this moment in her sleep. The mic squeaked once, then cleared into silence. "This isn't about feelings," she began, laying her hand on the binder like it held scripture. "It's about facts. It's about a child. And it's about what the law requires when safety is at stake." Chantel tried to interrupt. "This is slander," she snapped, stepping forward. But Pastor Timmons, without raising his voice, said simply, "Let her speak, Ms. Griggs. You'll have your time." The projector came alive behind them, casting light across the far wall. The first slide, a Zelle log with transfers from my account, dates, amounts, and her name beside every request. $200 for food, $350 for emergency tire, $500 for rent shortfall. The numbers stacked like dominoes, each one more damning than the last. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Then came the text thread. "Can you float $100 till Thursday? Don't tell Malik, but I need formula money. Ooh, our responsibility." All in Chantel's voice, stamped with time, tone, and emoji. Crystal let the silence work. Then she played the voicemail. Chantel's voice rang out across the room, careless and breathless, laughing. "That man paid me double when I cut the powder. He don't know I water it down half the time. Red bag stays under the bed so my daughter don't get nosy. She talked too much already." Gasps broke like glass. I didn't move. I watched Chantel's face. She froze, lips parted, eyes wide, fury folding into fear. Crystal closed the binder. "This evidence was submitted to Jackson PD and Child Protective Services this morning. The child's safety has been prioritized. Any further contact initiated by Ms. Griggs will be addressed through legal channels." Pastor Timmons stepped forward. "That's enough for tonight. This gathering is adjourned." No one applauded, but no one questioned. The projector dimmed. I sat down, not triumphant, not angry, just exhaled, because for the first time in weeks, the truth wasn't mine alone to carry. It had entered the room, and it had been heard. By 7:22 p.m., the folding chairs were half-stacked, casserole trays packed away, and the buzz of family night had collapsed into the low hum of something more solemn. In the small back office off the church admin wing, I sat across from Officer Perry again. His uniform looked stiffer under the fluorescent ceiling panel, his notebook open to a fresh page. Crystal slid the thick binder across the table, its weight landing with a soft thud. "This is everything," she said. "Hard and digital copies. Voicemail transcript, financial log, CPS correspondence, and sworn statements. All backed up, indexed, and time-stamped." He opened it carefully, scanning the tabs. "This lines up with what the department found during the property search. We'll cross-reference everything, but it's clear she knew what she was hiding, and what she was risking." There was no pride in my posture, no smugness in my voice when I asked, "What happens next?" He looked me in the eye. "We open a formal investigation into narcotics possession and endangerment of a minor. This isn't just about you anymore, Miss Clark. This is criminal." Outside the room, I could hear the organist playing something low and steady, an unscheduled hymn for whoever remained in the sanctuary. Inside, it was all paper and silence, and the steady scratching of Officer Perry's pen. Crystal leaned in. "We're also filing a motion for a protective order first thing tomorrow. It'll cover physical distance, digital harassment, and custody interference. Once that's processed, she won't be allowed within 200 feet of you or the child. I nodded, swallowing the tight knot that had lived in my throat for weeks. This wasn't victory. It was relief with edges. A closing door that wouldn't creak back open. Officer Perry slipped the binder into his evidence bag and sealed it with a printed tag. "We'll handle it from here." Those 6 words hit deeper than any apology could. Not because they promised everything would be easy, but because they meant I wasn't alone. I had done my part. I had kept the ledger, gathered the receipts, drawn the line. Now the law would carry it forward, and for the first time, I let myself believe it would be enough. On the morning of October 27th, the sky broke open with sunlight so clean it almost didn't feel real. No fog, no doubt. Just a clear blue canopy stretched over South Jackson, as if the weather itself had decided to offer a benediction. We spent the day putting things back in order. I scrubbed the living room baseboards, not out of habit, but as a way to reset the energy that had hung heavy since mid-October. She helped dust, her little hands clumsy but eager. We played gospel music, and for the first time in weeks, I heard her laugh with her whole chest. That afternoon, I received the call from Officer Perry. The red powder tested positive for fentanyl. Chantel has been picked up for questioning. We'll keep you updated on the formal charges. I thanked him. Not with relief, but with clarity. This wasn't revenge. It was responsibility finding its way back home. Later that evening, I tucked my granddaughter in, just like I had before any of this began. Same corner lamp, same lullaby hum. Only this time I handed her the stuffed bear Mullick had slept with when he was small. Its stitching was frayed, its belly lopsided, but it carried something real, something constant. "You're safe now," I told her, and I meant it. In the hallway, I hung the new keyring on the hook beside the thermostat. It was red, heart-shaped, and said, "My house, my rules."